Welcome to another episode of RoundTable with Steve. Today we're actually going to speak to Jerome Hill, a former detective with the City of Baltimore Police Department. He will give us the insight of what it's like to be a black police officer in the City of Baltimore. Jerome, are you there?
Yes, sir.
How long were you with the Baltimore Police Department?
I was with the Baltimore Police Office for about 8 years.
What was that like?
Well, it was definitely like no other experience I've ever had. I was also in Pittsburgh and ended my career in the state of Florida. It's an old, antiquated city. The infrastructure in many of the city areas is collapsing or is in great need of repair.
What do you think of the charges that were filed against the officers in the Freddie Gray trial?
You know, to be indicted on charges is one thing. Anybody can get indicted on any type of charge. The state's attorneys or anybody who wants to go ahead and charge these individuals could bring up any amount of charges. Proving them is going to be a bit more difficult, or what you want to try to do is with anybody, you're going to put as many charges onto the slate as you possibly can to see if any one of those will stick.
So do you think the state attorney is going to have a hard time proving her case?
No, I don't think she's going to have a hard time proving her case. I do believe that there is the misconduct charges. I think they have a better chance of sticking than anything else. But what's interesting in one of the charges, a little known homicide charge was thrown in there. The Braves Heart murder was thrown in there. That is something that a lot of people have never heard of before. Just let me break this down for that type of homicide charge. Is basically excessively neglectful in its term of something that you've done that was excessively neglectful, which caused the death of somebody.
What about sensitivity training? How much training do you guys get in the academy as far as dealing with other races and other cultures and things of that sort?
It's very limited in scope, the sensitivity training that they give you. It's not very all-encompassing sensitivity training classes that they do have. You know, you're drawing from life's experiences. Once I came into the academy, I understood that a lot of the officers were from other jurisdictions, other states, because of the fact that what's going on is that most of the residents that could get a job in Baltimore can't, because they've had other convictions and so on and so forth. So it's a very hard pull to have residents from Baltimore become police officers, because it's a male-dominated profession. That's one. And a lot of the males that are in Baltimore City, you know, they have been into some trouble in one form or another, whether it was, on their own or by indirect or, unfortunate circumstances.
Now, do you find that there's a pressure to make sure that a black man has a felony before he turns 18?
Some of the problems that I experienced, or some of the things which I questioned, were charges being brought up on juveniles for quality of life issues. Whether it be loitering in places that they shouldn't be at or wouldn't otherwise be at. Remember, a lot of these juveniles are very deprived economically. In a city of 650,000 residents, you're talking about the average, the high school graduation rate, it stands at 23%. That is abysmal. And you couple that with dropout rates that high, and you couple that with people who are and they're a product of their environment. So, for example, if they live on the east or west side of Baltimore, and they fill something out on their job application, You're talking about businesses around the area. Do they want to hire somebody from those type of areas? So there is a great deal of systematic socioeconomic background destructions of those platforms that are landing on those individuals, generationally, from generation to generation. So it is a huge problem.
What about the pressure to go easier on a white teen for the same thing that you might give a black teen a ticket or even arrest them for?
Remember, Baltimore is about 85% African American,
Mm-hmm.
and in the areas where I worked at, whites were the minority. Let's put it that way. Mind you, the crimes that were going on in the inner city and pockets of that city were black on black crimes. And if I had an individual, a white individual, at a particular place at night, dealing with all types of issues, for example, if I saw them at night at an all-black neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
trust me, I was pulling them over.
But that's you. You'll pull them over. But what about your white counterparts? Do you find that they're quicker to let a white person go for the same thing that they might give us a ticket for?
That stuff, I believe, did happen and was happening at the Baltimore City Police Department. I think that's systematic throughout all police departments, where you'll have individuals acting in practices like that.
Now, as a former detective in the city of Baltimore, did these recent events surprise you at all? I mean, did you see them coming?
Baltimore was just dynamite, ready to be lit and to explode. You can't have an inner city that has a poverty rate the way Baltimore does, where young men and women of color cannot in any way, shape, or form see past tomorrow. You have nearly 400 murders a year in that city. It's an open-air drug market where you can make on a particular corner anywhere between $70, $80, $90,000 a week selling heroin. Baltimore is a port city, and the heroin comes into the ports of Baltimore. It is the heroin capital of the United States. Everybody knows that it's cut up into ghettos. They dumb it down and sell it not only in the communities there, but ship it on 95 north all the way to Philly, New York, to the New England states, and back down to Washington, D.C., Richmond, all the way down here to Miami. It is funneled, it is the epicenter of the heroin drug trade. You are not, the people, the individuals that I would deal with in those communities who were selling drugs and who were regulating that with violence, they have a whole entire grip in those communities.
If local law enforcement saw this, why didn't the government see it? Why didn't the local government see it? And if so, what were they doing to get some of the kingpins, some of the people on the top, so that this way the drugs won't be able to trickle down? I mean, we see where they were arresting the kids on the corner, and we had the Say No to Drug campaign years ago. But what about the people that are bringing in the drugs? Like you said, this is a port city. What about the guys with the ships and things of that sort?
I believe that if you're bringing that much into a port city, you are connected in some way, fashion, or form with some type of government entity, or what we call, anyone in that, not only the government entity there, but there's somebody's connected with a gatekeeper.
Right.
Whether it be in the ports, whether it be with government, whether it be within the police department, it just did not matter. Somebody was a gatekeeper, and it just isn't one person. It has to be systematically and a bunch of people. That was not my level.
Now, it seems like in Baltimore, we keep hearing about the disenfranchised and things of that sort. How were the black and the white communities in Baltimore treated differently?
Baltimore City is a tale of two cities. It's the have and have-nots. To answer your question is this. Baltimore protected a class of people who could do for themselves. There are a couple spots in Baltimore that are very nice. When you take a look at it, northern Baltimore, Roland Park area, all the way down to South Baltimore or to Southeast Baltimore, where there's Fells Point, or you're in central Baltimore when you're talking about, the Inner Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
Those areas were protected tooth and nail. And thus, those individuals were treated in a different type of manner, bar none. But when you start getting into the other impoverished areas of the city, yes, there was a certain way officers would go ahead and handle their business, whether it was right or wrong, necessary or unnecessary. That is what Baltimore is talking about and having an issue with right now. For example, let's just talk of context of a car stop. And you have an individual that's being pulled over in Roland Park, white person. You might give a little bit of pause because they may speak the King's English. You might perceive them as having more education, thus having more resources to deal with you than someone who you might pull over in East Baltimore who doesn't talk the King's English, is speaking street vernacular, and thus you might have a perception that they don't know what they're doing, where you might have been dealing with a group of people who may not have any respect for the law because it has been going on for quite some time, and the law has no respect for them. And thus you assume or you lump up a class of people as being all the same, and you deal with them the same way, which is obviously, absolutely, unequivocally ridiculous and wrong.
Now, something that always puzzled me, why is it that when a white guy gets pulled over, only one police car shows up? But when the black guy gets pulled over, they bring out half of the squad to write him a ticket. Why is that?
Yeah, I think that might be something that goes on in here in Florida, South Florida type of thing, where it could be just a pretext to a stop, and you'll have people, once a car is pulled over, I've seen the same thing that you saw, Steve, where, you see 4 or 5 cars, and you're thinking to yourself, is that really necessary?
Now, when you're in your local area, you're known as Detective Hill, Officer Hill, whatever the case may be, but everyone knows that you are a police officer. What about when you travel outside of your local area? Let's say you go on vacation to New York, Arizona, California, whatever. Now they don't know you as being a police officer. So unless you're going to wear your badge on your chest, like Superman's symbol or something, no one knows that you're a police officer. Do you have the same fear that I do of being the next unarmed black man that's being shot?
I have concerns, Steve. I can't even begin to tell you that I would not have a concern. The thing I'm very confident in, and I think that I would get by, is that I do know police jargon. Obviously, I do know a set of 10 codes, or what it might be similar to the 10 codes, just being a police officer for a very long time. But trust and believe me, I know exactly what to do at the exact time if I was to get pulled over. Shutting the car off, taking the keys out, putting on top of the roof. I got my hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. And I'm going to be super respectful, only for the fact that some of the things that I've seen in my career and outside of my career, it leads you to pause on who you're dealing with. I don't know who that officer is, and that officer certainly doesn't know who I am. That officer's perception of me could be totally different than what I think of me, and vice versa. But I do know this. If I don't put myself in a position of strength, which doing that all the time, if I was to ever get stopped, what does this person do? puts his hand on 210, shuts off the engine, puts the key on top of the hood. I have surrendered. I have complied. But that's what I know to do. But Steve, for any one of your listeners, they may have never been pulled over by the police before. And thus, if they get pulled over for the very first time, what do you think they're going to be? They're going to be nervous.
Yeah.
You know, I would be nervous if I'm getting pulled over by the police. Not everyone reacts the same way under pressure. Pressure bursts pipes any day of the week. So, what if I pull over a young man who hears nothing in the news how police are, and if their perception is bad, and he gets nervous, doesn't shut off his car, and he doesn't know whether to go into a glove compartment to get the driver's license? What's the perception of the police officer that's coming up from behind the vehicle and thinking, oh, shoot, I see some furtive movement. He might be trying to do something against me because that officer is trained to see or trained to look for abnormal behavior or behavior that will lead to some type of suspicion of something further going on. It goes both ways. And certainly, I don't want your listeners to think that I am just trying to be pro-police here. I'm just trying to leave the layout of the land so people can see it on both sides, where I'm very cognizant that people are naturally afraid when we pull them over. So I have to act accordingly to know that not everyone handles pressure the same way.
Is there an open door policy for police officers to speak freely? I mean, like, can they go to the captain and say, "Hey, Captain, I feel a certain way. I don't like this neighborhood. I don't like whatever." Is there an open door policy, or are they afraid of being labeled as damaged once they voice a concern?
Well, Steve, I can assure you that each and every police department has an EAP, which is an employee assistance program, and many companies have it throughout the United States. It's encouraged, but I will tell you that there is a culture, there is a police culture that, thrives on toughness. And this is one of the things that we woefully, as police officers, need to do a better job of, is to encourage our brothers and sisters to let them know that, hey, we have your back, and to encourage them to go ahead and seek these type of services if we see some type of demeanor, a change in their demeanor, or anything like that that seems a little bit out of the ordinary. I wish, quite truthfully, I've known 3 officers that take their guns and to blow themselves away because of the things that have gone on in their lives, whether it was personal or professional. And it hurts my heart to this day to see them go through that type of stress. But I just want to let everyone know that I'm an advocate for everyone. But I just want to give you a perspective that a lot of these officers are seeing something on a day-to-day basis that your listeners, unless they are first responders themselves, would never imagine to see on a day-to-day basis. It takes a toll if you do not take care of yourself in a healthy manner.
As a black police officer, you're actually in a very unique position. Now, I don't know if it's uniquely bad or uniquely good, but how do you deal with it when you see a person that looks like you being assaulted or in some way wronged by a person who wears the badge that you wear?
There's always a confliction, and there's always conflict in your heart when you see something like that. More times than not, if I can, and I have observed things like that in my career, ain't no doubt about it. The fact of the matter is that you have to have a great deal of communication and trust with your fellow partners to go ahead and say, hey, guess what? Hey, we can handle it this way. So not only would it be an educational process for the officer that's next to you, but you don't want to get into any type of trouble yourself, not explaining to someone else what you saw. So I would was able to go ahead, under those mitigating circumstances, I was able to go ahead and squash any type of nonsense like that. But I can't work with every officer out there in the police force. And certainly, I'm going to say it, there are poor decisions being made by officers at times. And I'm not saying that's all officers. You know, there are some officers that might have, in all their career, made all the right decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like any job. There are mistakes made. The only unfortunate part with officers is they can't do a re-over if there is one that's fatal or even less egregious. For example, you know, I even find taking someone's freedom away from them, whether the charges be dropped or not, I find that highly, highly egregious.
Do you consider yourself a black man who's a police officer or a police officer who's a black man? So I guess the question would be, does the man make the badge or does the badge make the man?
Obviously, the man makes the uniform. You know, I can only speak about my experience. You know, when I held the badge, I was blue. I was blue through and through. I had a great deal of common sense. I dealt with a lot of things. I've seen a lot of things. I probably, in some point in time, you know, probably made a mistake with someone out there. You know, I like to think that everyone I put my silver handcuffs on, they deserved it. But truthfully, they might feel otherwise. You know, but we can only see things in 3D. And, you know, certainly I feel like there were injustices brought upon myself, being, you know, behind the badge, or things happened that I didn't deserve. For example, you know, obviously it is a rough business being in the inner city, dealing with a whole bunch of, you know, socioeconomic problems. Obviously, in dealing with those type of problems in inner cities, you're going to have a lot of volatile individuals. You have a lot of criminality in those places. Dealing with that type of pressures and criminality, obviously there's going to be times when it's going to get physical. It was not like you go ahead and chase after people and you finally catch them and they say, you know what, Detective Hill, let me put my hands behind my back. You're right, you caught me. I need to go to jail. You know, oftentimes it was either flight or fight. And these individuals, I mean, it's not like I'm a particularly big person. I'm not. I stand 5'6", 185 pounds. I'm chasing somebody who's 6'1", 6'2". They're going to turn around. If they feel like they're getting tired and they're trying to get away from me, more times than not, they're going to square up. And so I'm going to have to use physical. It's going to be a physical confrontation.
Explain to my viewers the best way to win against the police.
The fact of the matter is, whether you feel like there's an injustice to you, you're never going to win fighting a police officer out in the street. That will never happen. Where you're going to fight them at is in the court of law. But then I'll hear some viewers come back to tell me, well, the system is set up against me. And if you do not come from any type of affluence or have any type of money, then how can I fight you in court when all I can go ahead and afford is a public defender? I agree with you. I've seen it. If you are disenfranchised and you do not have money, chances are the way the system is set up at this point in time, it is much more difficult. So why would you make it more difficult for yourself? position of strength. Don't go ahead and because you've seen other images or you want to go ahead and ambulance chase, don't put yourself in that position. Give yourself a fighting chance. I agree with you. I am 100% behind individuals who give that type of argument. It's sad. It's a sad reality of American justice right now. I just want brothers and sisters out there to know that they put themselves in a position of strength. Do not, for any reason, think that you're going to be able to get over on the system by fighting. I don't understand I don't know where the probative value is of that. It's clear that for those who do not have means, don't exasperate the system even more by breaking or getting into these confrontations that will cost you dearly later on.